Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So it seems like yesterday was probably the worst day to do any analyzation of any polls whatsoever because I just came on today, checked the morning consult, and I was just thinking to myself, there's no way they would have new polls, and there's no way there would be new generic ballot polls, coming out a day after I make a video. It would just, that would be my luck, right? And I checked the morning consult, and I see August 13th, 2018, and I'm look down here, and I'm like, maybe they're just saying that they updated it because it says July 2018 right here. But then I look at the map, and I have memorized some of the Trump approval ratings in a number of these states. Utah never disapproved the president until now, so I know these numbers are new. Texas was above 10%. Over in North Carolina, it was approved of the president. Florida was +5. Now it is +4. So I know there are some changes in the map. Donald Trump did improve in some areas, but we will talk about that now. So today's topic is going to be whether or not Donald Trump is going to help or hurt the GOP in the 2018 midterm elections. So first of all, with an incumbent president, typically the incumbent president is disapproved of, including, statewide or nationwide. When it comes down to it, typically the president would like to avoid some areas where they're not too popular in. But we've seen Donald Trump go to pockets and certain areas in states that he may not be approved of at this moment in time. States like Michigan or Wisconsin, which both have increased in the terms of disapproval for the president. So has Pennsylvania. The only state part of the Rust Belt that has changed was Ohio. And I believe Indiana went over +1 for the president. But more drastic changes like in Wisconsin and Michigan. Surprising how Wisconsin disapproves of the president more than Minnesota. But I may make another video analyzing the approval ratings here. However, when we look at this map, it's very interesting to see how the president has been consistently disapproved of in around the same number of states. This was June 2018. May 2018, around the same states have always disapproved of the president. You see right around that Rust Belt area, including Ohio, sometimes at his lowest points where the Democrats were up at this point in time by 13 points on the generic ballot poll. It was very, very hard for the president to corral his base in some key conservative areas. He had a higher approval rating in Florida, then in Montana, then in Missouri, then in Kansas, then in Indiana. And now where we stand, well, it's higher in Missouri than it is in Florida. The same in Montana than it is in Florida, and higher in Indiana than it is in Florida. So there were certain cases where there was a time where Donald Trump was at his absolute worst in terms of approval. Now we're starting to see the same numbers that we've been seeing consistently across the same states. However, when we see these states that Donald Trump is not necessarily approved of in, sometimes he goes to those states, and I don't find that to be 100% beneficial for the Republicans' campaign. In Ohio, Troy Balderson won that election because of Donald Trump. But keep in mind that it's a state with a -1% approval rating of the president, and that was a Republican district. When it comes down to state and statewide elections, I guess, senator elections and governor elections, maybe he could campaign for some congressional elections. That would be understandable. When it comes down to Senate elections and governor elections, he needs to pull out of key areas. He cannot come to my home state of Maryland. He cannot go to Massachusetts. He cannot go to Vermont and expect to convince Democrats to vote for Republicans, because the reason why they're in is not because of Donald Trump. It was because of President Obama and a Republican wave year, and also those type of states with more moderate Republicans in office. Donald Trump is not one of those more moderate Republicans. And when we look at a couple other states, let's say Donald Trump goes to Wisconsin to help Tammy Baldwin, actually to help the Republican candidate who was decided last night. I will make a video right after this just analyzing the results there because there are very interesting results. But let's say he goes to Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota to campaign for Republican candidates statewide. Well, maybe Pennsylvania could have a minor positive impact for the GOP candidate, but in Michigan, probably not. Wisconsin, probably not. And Minnesota, probably not. So when it gets down to these three states, he's not going to do much in terms of changing the direction of the voters in those states, because he's already at a point where he's lost a number of voters there. He can gain them back before 2020, but he's probably not going to be able to convince them to vote for the GOP. The problem with his base is he was able to convince them from voting Democratic to Republican, but they didn't vote Democratic. They didn't vote Republican down the ballot. There weren't massive pickups in the Senate for the GOP. In fact, they lost 2 seats. There weren't massive pickups for the GOP in the House. They lost 6 seats. So Donald Trump was able to convince voters at a presidential level. That doesn't always turn into voters on the, midterm level. However, there are states where he will most definitely help the GOP candidates in Indiana, in Missouri, in North Dakota, in Montana, in Florida. Right now, Florida and Montana and North Dakota all approve of the president the same amount. So let's say he's able to flip Florida. Montana could become a flip for the GOP, North Dakota as well. if he goes over to Missouri and makes it a likely state with Indiana because he's able to somehow corral his base again, because he does have a net approval there higher than in Florida, North Dakota, and Montana, it seems like Donald Trump would be able to, make these states more competitive than before, and probably obviously in the favor of the GOP, because there's one thing Donald Trump does very well, and that is getting out his base to vote. But when these are Democratic voters, them coming out to vote does not benefit him whatsoever. He didn't convince many Democrats, let's say, because obviously some Democrats had to have switched over for these margins to change, but he didn't convince many Democrats in Missouri, Indiana, North Dakota, Montana. These were already Republican states. He did convince them in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And like we saw in the Pennsylvania 18th district, multiple news media organizations, they interviewed a number of voters, and some of them were Trump voters, but they were voting for the Democratic nominee. They believed that they voted for Donald Trump because they thought he was good for the economy. However, they also do believe Democrats are good for the economy. So if he does get them out to vote, and the vote is not for the GOP, what good does it do for him? And he's not going to say, my base, don't come out and vote if you're voting for a Democrat, because that would be too bold. He might say it as a joke, how all candidates are saying, we can leave some people if they're going to vote against us, whatever. But I don't find Donald Trump bringing out his voters to be beneficial in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, mainly because, number one, he isn't even approved of there. So where are these voters coming from? Back then, when he started off his presidency, let's look at his approval ratings statewide. Well, it was positive 10 in Pennsylvania, positive 7 in Michigan, positive 6 in Wisconsin. There were very few states where he was actually disapproved of positive 22% in Florida, even positive 9 in Illinois, positive 8 in New York. All right, Montana, which is now plus 4, plus 25, Oregon, plus 2, Washington, plus 1. The only states that disapproved of him: Rhode Island, which was negative 4, Maryland, which was negative 12, Massachusetts, which was negative 4, Vermont, which was negative 2, California, which was negative 6, and Hawaii was negative 14. I don't believe there were any other states that were currently disapproving of the president. He starts off, then a month passes, not that much change, still positively approved of in a number of these states. And then he starts losing his base, a little bit more drastically, because around this time, the Democrats started doing very well, the generic ballot, a number of states started becoming competitive in terms of approval rating. Then he gained some of that momentum back. However, the Rust Belt and those 3 states in the Sun Belt stayed the same. So right now, when it comes down to it, Utah, he does not need to go to Utah. Mitt Romney is going to win that Senate race with or without Donald Trump's help. There is no need for him to go there. In Arizona, I don't necessarily see it being beneficial for him to come out to Arizona and vote there. He was the sole reason why Arizona got close in 2016. Demographics made a very tiny play, considering that they weren't as drastic as they could be in future elections to benefit the Democrats. Arizona and Georgia, both of those states got close because of Donald Trump and the way that these Republicans did not want to vote for Donald Trump. And it wouldn't be just any GOP candidate would have made these close. Marco Rubio would have easily swept Arizona and easily swept Georgia, but possibly lost the Rust Belt. Donald Trump gained in voters, but also lost in voters in some key Republican areas, and it may just be a new type of Republican. Georgia could possibly go blue in the governor election, which was something that we couldn't really imagine before. Arizona could possibly go blue in the Senate race, which we wouldn't really be able to think about before. And right now, when we look at this, we're looking at the map, and it looks like it'd be very beneficial for Donald Trump to come out and corral his base. In West Virginia, he can do that. But I don't necessarily see him doing it in Arizona or Nevada. These are 2 states that were close in 2016, and one of them he lost. And right now, the Democrat is actually leading in the state that Donald Trump won in 2016. Kyrsten Sinema leads all of her GOP opponents, some by over 20%. So when it comes down to it, Arizona is probably going to be a state Donald Trump is going to avoid. He's probably not going to help the GOP there. And when we look at the generic ballot, and like I said, it was probably the worst day for me to discuss polling because, of course, they always want to come out with polls the day after I make the video, right? But it shows the Democrats ahead by 4.8%. That's a percentage point up from where it was before, but around a percentage point before. And now it's a considerable lead in the generic ballot. This is where it was yesterday, so it wasn't that much of a change, but it just looks, switching of the numbers for the Democrats looks better for them in overall. And when it comes down to it, Donald Trump is going to help the GOP. He is a phenomenal campaigner. He is going to be someone that's going to be very beneficial for them. However, it has to be in the right areas. You cannot expect Donald Trump to go to California and expect him to flip the state. You can expect it maybe in Montana or North Dakota, Missouri, these states where Donald Trump currently is approved of and could actually corral his base to come out and vote, compared to other states where he never had a base or his base was reliant on Democratic voters. which don't vote Republican in midterm years. And again, Donald Trump getting out his Democratic base, sure, maybe in a presidential election that helps because they would vote for him. But there are many Democrats there that voted for Trump in the general election, but also may not vote for someone who would push his policies, and they don't view it that way. It's not just a policy issue. They would vote for the Democrat maybe because they find the Democratic candidate more appealing to their own personal interests, especially for governor elections. Why would, people, let's say for example Wisconsin, let's say Scott Walker adapts a Trump type platform and say I would help Trump, but how would you help Trump as a governor? You are limited to the statewide boundaries that you're in, and you're not going to be legislating anything out of that. This is not a national Senate vote. This is not a House of Representatives. It's a governor election. So that's where I feel like Donald Trump is going to falter in some of these states. Down in Florida, I think he could possibly help Ross DeSantis, who probably will win this Republican primary late August in Florida. However, you can't rely too much on the president in some of these key states. Florida, Tennessee, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, North Dakota, Montana are states where Donald Trump can help in. That may seem like a lot, sure. But also, keep in mind, the Democrats do have a pretty good standing in West Virginia at this point in time. Indiana, not so much, so that one I can trust in the GOP column, along with, Missouri, no non-insider poll shows the state outside of McCaskill's column. So right now, McCaskill, I'm going to put this one as a pure toss because I don't want to make a characterization. Democrats aren't doing too well in North Dakota, but they are in Montana, not so much in Florida. So even if this map did stand, we would have 52 Republicans and 47 Democrats. So the general consensus is Donald Trump is helping the GOP in a number of these states. When it comes down to the governor elections, let's go ahead and take a look at the governor map. Well, there are a number of key areas where Republicans don't need Trump to come out and to come out and campaign and get voters out for them in Maryland or Massachusetts or Vermont or New Hampshire. Do you really think these GOP incumbents who already know they are going to win re-election or are a very, very close, have a close possibility of winning this election, think that they need Donald Trump to come out and vote? If anything, it would reverse the effect. Imagine if Donald Trump, sure, he can give a mild endorsement on Twitter, but if he came out and held a full rally in Massachusetts, Charlie Baker's numbers would go down. And, that may be a sad reality for many people, considering that a candidate's endorsement could make you lose voters. However, it's also expectable because a lot of our partisan politics is based off certain people. Remember when the KKK endorsed Donald Trump, and that was a whole thing, and then Donald Trump endorsed certain candidates like Roy Moore, and then everything was based off who endorsed you and why that was either good or bad. And obviously a KKK endorsement is anything but good, but still, just using that as an example, we're not going to see Donald Trump go out to states like maybe Michigan, maybe because he won it back in 2016 and he still sees a stronghold there, but he would have to focus on areas that are key Republican areas. He's not going to be convincing any more Democratic voters at this point. Pennsylvania already seems like it's out of his grasp, maybe for the Senate election, but I highly doubt it. Wisconsin seems like it's in the favor of the GOP at this point, so he could possibly go there, but keep in mind, -15, not good. Minnesota, I do not see him coming to at all. Iowa, possibly. Ohio, I feel like that's a definite because of John Kasich being so popular. And Iowa is probably still going to go to the GOP with or without Trump. Florida, that one he'll definitely go to because he loves Florida. And Colorado, probably not. New Mexico, probably not. Maybe Arizona for the governor race, not the Senate election. He has talked about the Senate election in Arizona before. However, even though, he's currently disapproved of there, but it is a state he won, larger than any three of the Rust Belt states, so maybe he'll come there. But I don't find it to be beneficial for the Senate election for the candidate. Maybe in the primary. That's the only part where I could actually see Donald Trump being beneficial to any candidate there. But when it comes down to the Senate election, I feel like these issues that are going to be used in the Senate election are going to be off the just the person itself, the policies, the candidates themselves. I don't find it to be a Trump versus Clinton type race because it's going to be very different than what we normally see, especially in a midterm year. Nevada, possibly, and Alaska. He'll probably fly out to Alaska for maybe, I don't know. I don't think he's going to focus on Alaska too much, considering that he's going to need to focus on some other key areas. But right now, the Republicans are already at 25, so again, the governor election's not that important, and I don't have the House map up there, but still, it seems like Donald Trump can be beneficial in some areas, but not some other ones. But overall, he's going to be beneficial nationwide, starting with his 60-day campaigning time where he campaigns 6 to 7 days a week. That's going to be very beneficial to the GOP nationwide. But when it comes down to certain states, he's going to be avoiding some but he's also going to be very helpful in others. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.